This video is brought to you by Gamersubs. Use code MHB at checkout for 10% off your next order. 100 platinum trophies. It's a big milestone, and I knew it was big because after I surpassed 90 platinums, every platinum from then on, I would get the question, so what's going to be 100? It feels like a big deal, and I wanted to celebrate the milestone right with a game I love. The problem was, I love too many games. I genuinely couldn't decide what game was going to be the one to get us into triple digits, and more importantly, I didn't want to decide. It only felt right to put some of my all-time favorite games into a wheel and let the RNG gods decide for me. As always, if you do end up enjoying the content, be sure to like the video, comment below some more platinum if you'd like to see me tackle next, subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos, go over to twitch.tv/MayorHairBear where we streamed this entire platinum journey live, or MayorHairBear VODs in case you can't catch the streams but still enjoy hours and hours of content. Alrighty, this is for platinum number 100. It's a special milestone, so for such a milestone, I wasn't able to just be like, this has to be platinum number 100. There's so many great games that I just love that we haven't platinumed yet that I'm like, I'd be happy with. Literally any of these I'd be happy with. So that's kind of my mindset. So there's things like Dark Souls, literally might be my favorite game of all time. Fallout New Vegas, incredible. Wolfenstein, I've grown up with Wolfenstein. Return to Castle Wolfenstein was the first game I ever, one of the first games I ever played or remember playing. And this is the first one we can platinum. Mass Effect 2, just incredible. Alan Wake, same thing. God of War 3, I know we've only platinumed Ragnarok, and I still need to platinum, the first, second, all that sort of stuff, but God of War 3 is my favorite, so it has to be on here. Blasphemous might be my favorite indie game of all time. It is incredible. It's seriously incredible. Kingdom Hearts 2, sort of similar to God of War 3. I know we haven't platinumed any of these, but Kingdom Hearts 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, so I don't care if we jump where the story's a bit all over the place. If we're jumping in, it is what it is. I love that game. Middle-earth Shadow of War and Aliens Dark Descent I have actually not played, so the reason they're on here is because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan and Aliens fan, and I've heard good things about Shadow of War, I've heard good things about Dark Descent, and I figured why not? They're two games I want to play at some point, so I would be, I'd be very happy with a platinum 100 on either of these series. And Ratchet & Clank, a bit ambiguous. I just don't know where I'm going with that one yet because I love so many of those games. I'd probably be leaning towards 3. We'll spin the wheel and we'll see what we get, eh? Gotta love that. I was gonna say that that could have, I was like, that feels like it's deadline. It's like, I thought it was gonna give me the, I don't know. Alan Wake, I think that just makes sense. Alan Wake. The fates really did pick a good one here. Alan Wake is a very special game to me, not only because it's just an incredible video game, but because back in 2019, I'd been at this YouTube thing for about 3 years, and I just could not get any real traction. After 3 years, I had myself about 250 subscribers, give or take, and I was in a bit of a content limbo. I was doing shorter comedy-style game reviews, very much trying my best at a cadicarous impression, but I wasn't happy with a lot of the content I was putting out there and decided to make a shift. I loved watching people like SkillUp, Whitelight, Joseph Anderson, and Racevic. All these creators who would really go in depth with their gaming analysis, and I sort of figured, why not give it a go? I hadn't played Alan Wake in a long time, but felt it was an underrated game, so I revisited the game and went to work. Now the video itself, looking back, is a rough watch personally, but it was my first big hit on YouTube, and the response from people watching was awesome and encouraged me to keep going. And it's sort of history from there. At the beginning of 2020, I finally cracked 1,000 subscribers, and in 2022, I actually managed to go full-time here on YouTube. So whilst I may not be creating the same style of content as I was back then, I have a lot of fondness in my heart for Alan Wake because it was almost like the video that just said, hey, keep pursuing this dream, it will be worth it. Anyway, history lesson aside, and to cut a long story short, it felt right to celebrate this milestone with Alan Wake. But more importantly, what's the platinum like for Alan Wake? Well, according to PSN profiles, the game ranks a 4 out of 10 in terms of difficulty, takes 2 playthroughs, and should be about 25 hours to complete. If that's all we were going for, but it isn't. I'm also going to be 100%ing the game, which means getting all the trophies in the 2 DLCs as well, which should add a further 6 hours to our runtime. I was starting this journey with 17 trophies already unlocked, but most were for simple stuff you get for playing through the game, and I was going to be restarting this process from scratch anyway to get the full experience. So I booted up Steam, loaded into the game, and away we went. Our first step in this 100% journey was to beat our first playthrough on easy while finding all 298 collectibles. Yes, almost 300 collectibles, which as much as I love this game, outside of the manuscripts, these are pretty worthless. We were also playing on easy because the nightmare difficulty, which we need to play on as well, isn't unlocked until after you've beaten the game once. Another feature I absolutely hate, but whatever, who wants to do a collectible hunt on the hardest difficulty anyway? But with those parameters set, let's get stuck into this. Alan Wake is a writer, and a successful one at that, but for the past 2 years has suffered with severe writer's block. So he and his wife Alice decide to take a vacation to the mountain town of Bright Falls. On the way, Alan has a nightmare, and this is where we get our tutorial, as shadowy figures try to kill us, and the only way to stay safe is to use the light to ward off these creatures, using the flashlight to take away the darkness, and finishing off the enemies with our firearms, and going to the light to regenerate your health and just in general, stay safe. We awaken from our nightmare in Bright Falls, where Alan goes to retrieve the keys to the cabin, making sure to get the jukebox going for the old fellas, as this will be needed for a trophy later. We're looking for Carl Stuckey, but bump into a creepy old woman instead who says Stuckey's ill, but gives us the keys to the cabin anyway, only to drive off and have Stuckey chase after us, but I'm sure everything's fine. We drive to our cabin in the middle of Cauldron Lake, and as we get set up, Alice reveals the true intentions behind this trip. It's not to have a vacation, it's to have a change of scenery to hopefully break his writer's block, as well as meeting with a famous psychologist in town, Dr. Emil Hartman. Alan, rightfully angry, storms out, only to rush back in at the sounds of Alice screaming for help. We see Alice being dragged into the lake and dive in after her, only to regain consciousness in a crash car in the woods with no memory of how we got here. We see a gas station in the distance, a way out of this mess, so that's where we head off to. Only those shadowy figures from our nightmare at the beginning, well, they're here again and as murder driven as ever. We're not alone here though, as an angelic man in a diver suit guides Alan, leaving behind pieces of a manuscript we've apparently written, again with no memory, called Departure. We quickly see that these pages are precursors for what we're about to experience, and that these murder-hungry shadows are known as Taken, townsfolk possessed by some unknown dark entity. But with the help of our flashlight, flares, flare gun, and regular firearms, we trek through the woods, ultimately killing a possessed Stuckey before reaching the gas station. Alan calls the sheriff, Sarah Breaker, to inform them of Alice's disappearance, but somewhat confused, Sarah brings Alan to Cauldron Lake, where we learn there is no cabin there. The island and cabin were sunk years ago. Sarah believes Alan has gone a bit loopy and takes him to the police station as episode 1 comes to a close. Episode 2 begins at the police station, where Alan hides the fact that he's been experiencing hallucinations, because I mean, that's not a good look right now, and receives a call from a man claiming to have kidnapped Alice. He demands the pages of Departure in exchange for her. As we're about to leave the station, Hartman appears to invite us to his psychiatric hospital, which gets him punched in the face as Barry arrives, Alan's agent, and the two head off to meet the kidnapper. We meet the kidnapper at a local national park, who demands the pages, as well to be expected, but doesn't show any proof of having Alice, nor do we have all the pages anyway. So we get into a scuffle before he slinks off into the night. With this mission a bust for now, we need to head back to Barry, and this is where finally I unlocked my first trophy for the game, as while we were driving around I made sure to take advantage of the respawning Taken and take out 15 with my car, There we go. Right way. You have peeled 15 taken off your bumper. We finally got a bloody trophy. And as I was getting ambushed just trying to get my sweet collectibles, got another trophy for using a flare to just buy us some breathing room. Back I say! We save Barry from the nightmare of bird swarms at the cabin, and the two agree we need to find more pages. Luckily, Rose from the diner earlier rather creepily informs us she has the manuscript. As we're shown, she's being controlled by the creepy woman, and the two bozos head off to Rose's as episode 2 comes to a close. We meet Rose the next morning, but she drugs both Barry and Alan, and when we wake up, we've been hanging around for far too long. So long, in fact, that the FBI is on our ass now, in particular Agent Nightingale. We have to leave Barry behind, still manuscriptless, and flee from the FBI as they chase us through the forest rather poorly. And I say poorly because Alan, as we'll really see in the next playthrough, has the stamina of a hardcore chain smoker. Man's life is constantly in danger and he can barely stomach a 20-meter dash. With the feds off our ass, we need to meet the kidnapper once more, promising we have the pages. On the trek to the meetup point, since there are flashbangs aplenty and they're bloody useful, I killed my 50th taken with flashbang grenades. Thunder and lightning, 50 taken have felt your fury. Also, your flashbangs. And another 50 kills with our trusty flare gun. What light through yonder window? When we reach the meetup, we learned that Mott never had Alice, as both he and Alan are hurled into Cauldron Lake by an evil tornado, ending episode 3. We start episode 4 in Hartman's psychiatric hospital, as according to Hartman, we've had a severe psychotic break triggered by Alice's drowning. All that supernatural, taken, darkness nonsense was in our head. Just sit back and relax in the loony bin. Of course we don't do that though, as we immediately try to escape this place as it's under attack by the darkness. Oh, and it's here we learned the kidnapper was paid by Hartman to lure Alan to this place, which is very cool, top tier help from the psychiatrist if he really believes this is all a psychotic break to mess with Alan some more, I guess, but whatever. We don't have to deal with him anymore anyway. Alan meets up with Barry and the two fight through the darkness, where we just so happen to get our 100th kill with the revolver. Hey, 6-gun scribe, 100 taken with the revolver. The two escape the lodge as the darkness engulfs the building and all those inside. Alan and Barry begin to learn the truth behind Cauldron Lake from those in town. The dark presence is trapped within the lake, attempting to escape by using its powers to turn art, this time Alan's writing, into reality. It previously tried this with the poet Thomas Zane, the diver who's been helping us along the way, by taking the form of his partner who drowned at the lake, Barbara, which is the woman Alan's been seeing. Zane was able to resist the darkness by using his writings to cause the eruption that sank the island, but stranded himself in the lake as well. The darkness has grown strong enough once again though to start to take over the townspeople and create the Taken in another attempt to escape. Bit of an info dump there, but it's important. Anyway, Alan and Barry get separated for a time, agreeing to meet up at the Andersons' farm. Along the way, grabbing a 2-for-1 shotgun kill. There we go. 2 for the price of 1 before reaching the farm. The farm is an absolute gauntlet of Taken, having hordes of Taken and badass tunes from old gods of Asgard that sadly, well, I want to make money from this video, so I can't share, but look into them if you're not aware, especially Children of the Elder God, oh, and Poets of the Fall War. You won't regret it. As we fight our way through the hordes, we do get some moments of reprieve, and it was here I finally got our first collectible reward for listening to all 11 radio shows. KBFFM. You haven't missed a single radio show. Feels early to get that one. Before Barry and Alan take shelter at the farm, getting pissed on moonshine before passing out. It's here where Alan recalls memories of the night he lost Alice, re-emerging from Cauldron Lake and being forced by the darkness to write Departure. The darkness is using his words to try and escape, holding Alice in the lake to entice him to keep going. And with that revelation, that's the end of episode 4. So I want to get a big perchance to dream. Oh, so that's what What's happening? Episode 5 begins with Alan and Barry in custody, arrested by Agent Nightingale, only for the Taken to attack the precinct and drag him away into the dark. That was enough evidence to get the sheriff to believe us and agrees to help us in tracking down Cynthia Weaver, the lady afraid of the dark in the beginning who knew Zane and prepared for the darkness's return. But first we need to get out of town and to a chopper, and of course there are more Taken trying to stop us along the way. But first we need to stop off at the diner before leaving town. I needed to hear Coconut again. Drink them both up. We managed to reach the helicopter, survive the Taken attack, and actually complete this whole section without dying because we're god tier gamers and not at all because we're playing on easy. List. An idyllic small town without being killed. Oh, I mean, that was, on accident, but we'll take that. Didn't even know that was a trophy. Of course, the chopper can't take us all the way there. We need more struggles, so we fall out and need to meet the gang down the road. This is where we grabbed a few more combat trophies for doing things like slow-mo dodging 20 times. Yeah, missed by a mile. Using the environment to kill 20 Taken. Collateral carnage, we're getting through that. I thought that was going to be a tricky one. And changing batteries 100 times. There we go. Energize! Changed 100 batteries. We meet up with Cynthia in her bunker, but for her to lead us to a secret weapon, first we need to fix the power, which after a quick puzzle and trophy, again, please. Gatekeeper. We complete and head back to Cynthia, who agrees to meet us at the dam after we save Sarah and Barry. More Taken killing moments later, getting our 50th kill with the hunting rifle for good measure. Taken season! Okay, the hunter rifles are done too. We save Sarah and Barry, reach the dam, and Cynthia leads us to the well-lit room. This contains a light switch known as the clicker that through Alan's writing possesses the ability to destroy the darkness. And so ends episode 5, leaving just one more episode to go. The Lady of the Light. Episode 6 sees Alan off to reach Cauldron Lake once and for all to end this. This is a pretty non-linear episode where we are finally getting our collectible rewards for exploring. First for watching all 14 TV shows. Couch potato! Alright, now we're halfway. Finding and reading all 25 signs. Bright Falls aficionado. Taking out a heap of birds with our light. There should be this. Okay, if it flies, it burns. I knew there was a frickin' trophy for this. Finding all 30 hidden chests. Alrighty, every nook and cranny. Finding all 91 of the 106 manuscript pages on normal. No, it is. Okay. There you go. You have found every manuscript page in normal. The other 15 are only found on Nightmare. As we reach the lake, taking out a wild tornado. Tornado wrangler, smashing through trophies. And diving into Cauldron Lake. It's here we find our 100th coffee thermos in the dark place where thoughts and ideas become reality. Hyper-caffeinated. We enter the cabin, encountering Barbara once again, and destroy her with the clicker. But to maintain balance in the story, we needed to complete Departure, freeing Alice from the lake, but in turn stranding himself in the dark place. And just like that, our first playthrough was complete. Departure. With step 1 done and dusted, I wasn't jumping straight into the Nightmare playthrough just yet, as first I wanted to clean up some miscellaneous trophies I missed the first time through, as well as complete both DLCs. Now there were 3 trophies I wanted to focus on in particular, and hope the rest sort of came along with that process, and they were Meet the Deadline, for reaching Cauldron Lake in episode 3 in less than 30 minutes, Child of the Elder God, for completing the concert standoff without dropping to low health or dying, and Gunless Wonder, which is for completing episode 6 without firing a single bullet. So first things first, I got my speedrunning shoes on and tried to beat the second half of episode 3 in less than 30 minutes. This is apparently a pretty lenient time, but that doesn't mean it's not stressful. I mean, this is one of the longer parts of the game, but it is good practice for a lesson we'll need for our Nightmare playthrough. Just avoid as many fights as you can. Not too many though, we did still need to get some shotgun kills, which we got on this journey, taking out 50 enemies with shotguns. It's not just a typewriter brand. And after a pretty stressful run, as this level seems to go forever when you're on the clock, I did manage to get it done with 5 minutes to spare. Yes! Okay, thank Christmas. Holy moly. That was stressful. Next up, it was time to head to episode 4, first to get some missable trophies at Hartman's Lodge for listening to all of his recordings about us. Medical opinions. And for watching this TV, which I swear I did the first time through, but anyway. See, how did I get all the TVs, and yet this is apparently one? With those 2 trophies out the way, it was time to headline for these ungrateful Taken and try to not get hit at all was the goal. I was playing this one more like better safe than sorry, as again, it's just to avoid going to low health, but trying to not get hit at all was actually tough. You do need to be on your toes here no matter the difficulty, but with some smart flare placement, you can avoid getting overrun and do this all without taking damage. There we go. Child of the Elder God. Let's go. Now, all that was left before we left the main game was to complete episode 6 without firing a bullet. You can still use flares and flashbangs, but do not fire your weapons. Not much to talk about here other than the fact, again, it does teach us how to best approach Nightmare difficulty, as we basically have to run away from absolutely everything here. It definitely takes a bit longer than usual, but still not too bad to get done, if a little strange. Especially that crap. Gunless Wonder. That's in the video now. Good. That's good. Now it was time for the DLCs, with 8 and 9 trophies apiece, and 2 of the more annoying trophies in this game both centered around completing their respective DLC in one go. No dying, restarting checkpoint, quitting out, nothing. Just sit down and play, and even though these are short DLCs, clocking in at about an hour on average, these are stressful to say the least. So my plan was simple. If I needed to beat these deathless, I was doing it on my first attempt. All trophies, one playthrough. First DLC up, The Signal. Continuing on from the end of the game, Alan is stuck in this surreal version of Bright Falls, realizing he's stuck in the dark place. Zane is still here to help us though, telling us to follow a signal through our phone in order to guide us through the dark place. It doesn't take long for Alan to encounter screens playing what seems to be an off-hinge version of himself, using the dark place to put us in danger with hordes of Taken. Thankfully, we can control the dark place a bit ourselves with items, resources, and it's all just one flashlight away. As we make our way through moments from the base game, Dreamified, we stumble across a basement with a crap load of furnaces, and we need to set each one of them off. Not straight away, we do want to use them on the Taken, as we do have to play it safe, but once the Taken are gone, we go for it. Words will never harm you. There we go. God. Thought that one was bugged for a second. And make it outside again, where we bump into Barry. A friend in need. A dream Barry, more of Alan's subconscious, who, like Zane, helps guide us through this crazy world. Now, not much happens story-wise until the end, so let's go over some trophies. One stipulation with this DLC is for a trophy we can't enter any vehicles, which makes this section a lot scarier to make it through deathless, I'll say that. License revoked. You completed the signal without entering a vehicle. So at least we've done that. As well as finding all the cardboard buddies. Cardboard companions. Alright, that's all the cardboard cutouts done. And all 10 alarm clocks, because we gotta have some collectibles to find. Ooh, TikTok. Anyway, the signal leads us back to our memory with Alice and our apartment, and this is where Zane reveals that Alan is the reason why the crazy Alan even exists. It's a part of Alan consumed by fear and his intense thoughts that are affecting the dark place. Oh, and that version wants us dead. Now this is the final boss of the DLC, and so far, through playing it safe, I was doing pretty well. But I can't lie, I was nervous for this fight given it's basically a lot of taken objects and I am terrible at fighting them. Oh, and also I need to win in less than 90 seconds. Thankfully, I'd been saving my flares and flare gun ammo, so this actually was a breeze. Fast and Furious. With the TV defeated, we awaken back in the cabin once again, realizing that Alan is still trapped here, finishing the first DLC and doing it without dying our first go. A friend indeed. And run on sentence. Whew. Okay, that's DLC 1 done. Pretty good. Without the guide, I would have been way more stressed. I was already stressed. I was sweating. Like, my palms are genuinely sweating. Next up, the Rider. Still stuck in the dark place, Alan regains consciousness and accepts the fact that he is the cause of the insane experiences he's having here, regaining all his memories in the process. Where the Signal was a much more combat-heavy DLC, instead, the Rider has gone for Alan Wake's true gameplay strength: platforming. Are you serious? Yeah, this made me pretty quickly give up on getting all the trophies in this DLC in one go, because the platforming just isn't great, and while trying to find all the collectibles this time, it's just a recipe for disaster. So I decided to split this into 2 runs. The first where I get every other trophy, and the second for doing it all in one sitting, deathless. It doesn't take long to reach Zane, where he gives us our objective. Irrational Alan is still inside the cabin controlling the dark place, and we must regain control if we want any chance of escaping this place. Zane guides us to a lighthouse across this hellscape, while Irrational Alan attempts to stop us with hallucinations of Alice, as well as sending his army of Taken after us. It doesn't take long to reach the toughest platforming section of this DLC, and not only is it tricky, but for the trophy Whirlwind, we need to finish it in less than 60 seconds. It does. Okay, we at least got that done. Whirlwind. This is a trippy DLC. The world really does warp every which way as we make our way through Irrational Alan's obstacles. Ding! We reach a conversation between Hartman and our other self, where we're eventually prompted to listen to what Alice had to say about us. Oh, Heartbreaker, there we go. I was gonna say, what the hell? A little further, we stumble across an enormous typewriter. Hey, creative space. Weird big ass typewriter. And eventually get close to the lighthouse, where for another missable, this DLC is filled with these by the way, go gentle into that good light, which is for reaching the lighthouse without firing a weapon. Sounds tougher than it is, since the light from the lighthouse does a lot of the heavy lifting here. Go gentle into that good light. Let's go. We pass through the lighthouse and end up back at the cabin, which is where I found the last of the 10 video games. Licensed properties. Woohoo! And it was time to face our demons. As Alan reaches the cabin, Barry tells us that we will have to reject all of the illusions, even imaginary Barry, before we can face off against his insane counterpart. This fight sees us battle Hartman, the old Anderson brothers, and of course Barry, which we not only have to defeat, but for another missable, need to win without entering low health. Thankfully, with plenty of flares, this is no issue, as we take them all out one by one and enter the cabin. Kill your darlings. You put your imagination in its place. Oh, Iron Will, we did get it. Dope. You faced your demons and gave no grounds to them. The Irrational Alan is comatose from his paranoid state on the floor when Alan reconnects with him to make the two whole once again. Alan realizes that he can't let himself fall into that state of fear again, returning to the typewriter to begin a new story. And that is where we left Alan for 13 years, but more importantly, marks the end of the second DLC. Now all that was left was to run through it all again, now knowing what to expect, and realistically, the beginning with that platforming is the toughest part. The rest really isn't that bad. And after a quick 30-minute speed run through the DLC, I did manage to grab the final trophy for doing this all in one go. No punctuation. Yes, we got it. But with the DLC complete, the main game basically finished, all that was left to do was complete the game on Nightmare difficulty whilst grabbing the remaining 15 pages of the manuscript. And boy, oh boy, I wish this was more interesting to talk about. Nightmare difficulty is more annoying than difficult because it just takes so long to destroy the darkness with your flashlight that it almost isn't worth it. The enemies are just tankier and Alan is as flimsy as ever, and it's just not that fun because it's not worth wasting your resources on killing the Taken if you don't have to. This is basically a running simulator for the second playthrough, as you can avoid most fights in the game just by reaching the next light source. Thankfully, I did already have everything else unlocked because doing all the collectibles and missable trophies on Nightmare would be terrible. But after another 6 hours, we found all the manuscript pages. I need specifics. Give me a specific. Collector's Edition! Woo-wee! And beat the game once again for that sweet platinum trophy. There we go. Alan, wake up. Alright. Hard-boiled writer. Woohoo! And the platinum trophy. Let's go. 100% Alan Wake is done. We woke up. Yeah, we did. 100! Woohoo! So after 23 hours in total, 2 hours better than the base game guide, might I add, I seriously am incredible. What did I think of Alan Wake's Platinum Trophy and the game in general? I mean, where do I start with Alan Wake? As I said, a game that holds a very special place in my heart, and I just love revisiting it. Say what you want about the gameplay and how it's aged, I still love how unique it is, but the real winner here is the story. My god, the story is just phenomenal. It's immediately intriguing, the pacing is well done, the world is masterfully crafted, the threat and journey of how to stop it is captivating. It's just a masterpiece in terms of story. Still Remedy's best in my opinion, though I've not played Alan Wake 2 yet. If you've never played Alan Wake, I highly recommend it, trophies or not. Speaking of the platinum though, this one is for the most part alright. There's a lot of collectibles here which again feel mostly unimportant, and forcing a second playthrough because the difficulties aren't all unlocked just is never it for me. It's not one of my favorite platinums or 100% experiences, but it sort of is. I love this game, and I love that I finally added it to my platinum collection for such a cool milestone, no less. But it does contain a lot of trophy hunting elements I just am not a huge fan of. With that being said, this was more than anything a channel milestone, a way to look back and just see how far this channel has come. I've been making YouTube videos for close to 9 years now, full time for 2 years. This is my job. I pay the bills by playing video games. That's insane, and to remember a time back in 2019 where I thought maybe it was just never going to happen. It's a really humbling feeling, and I owe Alan Wake and the community a lot for keeping me pursuing this dream. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video, make sure to leave a comment with Alan Wake Up to let me know that you made it to the end. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to leave it a like because it helps let me know that you enjoyed yourself. Comment below some more games you want to see get platinum next, as well as answering, would you watch an Alan Wake 2 platinum video in the near future? Thank you as always to all my channel members for that extra level of support, and special thanks to those in the Bear Club: G&T Puppy, Jackie White, Nugget, Dark Wolf, Daniel Fitzgerald, Scott Unwin, Steel Vanguard, MPO Crusader, Nef, and Lug Knights. It really does mean a lot to me. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, go give my socials a follow if you fancy at MayorHairBear, join the Discord server to have a chat, go and chuck me a follow on Twitch if you want to see most of these platinum journeys live, or MayorHairBear VODs if you can't make the streams, but still want to watch hours and hours of content at your own pace, and I'll catch you all in the next video.